Welcome back to our first ever twice in one day filming doubleheader.
Have we never done that before?
No.
Wow, so much news.
We didn't even change clothes.
Ta-da.
It's true. Yeah, that kind of gives it away.
For those of you who are just joining, however, in our last episode, we received a letter from a viewer
Previously.
in Cleveland, Ohio, Mark Cantor, who asked us to please address the confusion in the marketplace over things like XAuth, OAuth. He didn't say it, but also OAuth, wrap, all of that stuff. So I think
XAuth.org.
Yep.
we ought to get into that. And his, he basically said, explain to us peons why these two terms are being bantered about, like we're supposed to know what the they mean. So that's what we're going to do, and
That's
put
right.
it in a broader industry context. Who wants to start?
Well, so let's lay down some vocabulary. All right. So we know
Trepidatious.
No.
Oh, sorry, not that.
that's
Okay, sorry.
That's like a nickel word right
Yeah.
there. All right. So we got OAuth. We know what OAuth is, the authorization protocol for the web, right? OAuth wrap / OAuth 2.0 are essentially the same things. And the idea is to simplify the OAuth process for developers so that it can be much easier to implement, much easier to use, and it does away with a lot of the complexity that was part of OAuth 1.0.
And let's recall briefly, lots of people use lots of different websites. They have data. They want to sometimes share that data with people or applications on other sites. You don't want to have to give away your whole password and your entire account. So you want to have some way that you can hand out a little token that gives access to some of the data that you have control over, you can get rid of later.
And this token is essentially your valet key for the web.
That's what OAuth did. The problem is, a little bit too technically complex for a lot of developers, and there was a couple of use cases that it didn't really handle. You had Microsoft and some others get together and propose OAuth wrap, which was sort of an attempt at a kind of a next generation version that simplified a lot of things. Simultaneously, you had OAuth moving into the IETF, which is a very august standards body, brought you such standards as the web and email. And because really OAuth is meant to be that level of building block.
Yeah.
And then luckily, a lot of what happened in OAuth wrap got to merge in and inform OAuth 2.0, which is now what everybody's working towards. And as we talked about in the previous episode, Facebook's actually already shipped their support. It's funny, they shipped support for the current working draft of OAuth 2.0, so that's really strong support.
Wow.
That it's sort of, as it continues to settle down, they'll keep making changes. And Twitter has sort of partially shipped that in as part of their Anywhere and later, and Yahoo and Google and lots of others very involved in the OAuth 2 group. So that seems to be one of the best examples we've seen of real cross-industry convergence around this common standard, because it is, after all, at the building block of so much what we do.
Well, I think there's also a realization, and we pointed this out before, that there's very little competitive advantage to be gained by having your own authentication
Right.
protocol.
Right.
Previously there was BBauth from Yahoo, there was AuthSub from Google, there was, on and on, all these different technologies that developers had to learn over and over again, which of course would introduce errors and create a lot of friction.
Well, it's also it's a security protocol, right?
That's
So you don't want to be the only guy working on your security protocol. You want to have lots of people looking at it and figuring out how to make it secure. And if there's ever any vulnerabilities just that are exposed, you want to have a whole community of people come together and fix it, get the best and brightest across the industry. So
yeah.
So when it seems like, though, for folks who are following it from the sidelines, it's a little bit chaotic at the moment, where we've got 3 or 4 different terms being bandied about.
But really, OAuth 2.0 is the thing that everybody's converging on. So I think that's pretty clear at this point.
And in what sort of time frame should we expect to see kind of tangible fruit from that?
Well, like you say, you've already seen something shipped from Facebook, and you see a lot of the other big players clearly kind of waiting in the wings for things to settle down a little bit more. We're on sort of stable draft 4 of OAuth 2.0 through the the IETF as a whole process for doing these things. So that's actually getting pretty good. So it's certainly a this year kind of thing, as far as I can tell, maybe even sooner. Now that isn't actually a good segue to you've got this embarrassment of riches now that you have so many sites offering up their data in a standard format. The next question obviously is, how do you choose which site to use when you show up someplace else, and how do sites attract you by saying, hey, look, you can already use this data or this account that you've got. And we've talked on the show a number of times about the so-called NASCAR problem of, if you just put a button up for every single website on the web and say, hey, choose one, it becomes very distracting for users. And so there needs to be a way to make that easier. And more specifically now, we talked in the last show about how both Facebook and Twitter have taken this approach of dropping in these lightweight iframes that actually bring your identity from the existing site. And if you think about that, if you just assume I'm only going to integrate with Twitter or Facebook, you sort of have to just check one site to know, hey, is the user logged in? Can I show them this cool thing? But if you want to potentially work with a whole bunch of different sites, it's very slow for users to actually check each site independently, right? It's like opening every single door to see what's behind it. And that's exactly where XAuth came from. And actually, we talked in the past in the community a number of times around, should there be some central place where the user declares what services they're using, that sites can just look there as opposed to having to ask every question. But the company that really felt this pain acutely and decided to move on it was Meebo. I think we've done one of our first shows. You remember the giant pirate emoticon? Go back in the archives. It's a classic. I think I had like long hair back then or something. But anyway, Meebo, great web instant messaging platform, and they've now put there's this bar you can put out on any website that lets you do instant messaging and sharing across. And they, of course, aggregate Instant Messenger from AOL and from Yahoo and from Microsoft and Facebook and a bunch of others. So they have this problem in spades. And so they proposed this xauth.org as this neutral third-party site where any provider, say Google, Yahoo, Facebook, Twitter, or smaller sites, if a user logs in, they can write a little information into this central place, xauth.org, which can be as simple as, hey, someone on this browser is logged into Google, but I'm not going to tell you anything more. Or if the user opted in, maybe it could be even a little bit more information. Maybe it's a profile photo or a name or something like that. And the nice thing is then Meebo or any other website can just check that one location and see the list of places that the user uses and personalize the experience on their website directly for the services that they know the user has actually gotten is logged into. So it's very complementary. The name is a little bit confusing, XAuth, OAuth, but actually you can think about it as XAuth is sort of who should I talk to, and OAuth is now how do I talk to them.
Mm-hmm. So another way perhaps to frame this, and the way that I've been thinking about it too, since I did this work with Mozilla last fall, I'm thinking about how the browser can be involved in these questions, is to realize that there are essentially 3 different ways to go about presenting identity information to websites. And as you pointed out, you can either ask every single website in the world that's known to you about whether or not a user has an account at that site, and presuming the sites actually are willing to tell you, that's one solution, but it's very slow. The other one is to put it into a central server like XAuth. And so that sort of becomes your system registry while you're browsing the web that is localized to your particular browser at that moment. The other is to actually have the browser itself manage that information for you. So
after all, the browser knows which sites you've been visiting and where you go and so on.
And so before you even start your browsing session, you could essentially tell it I prefer to use Facebook or I prefer to use Google or whatever, and have your browser automatically advertise that information to the websites that you visit based on your own preferences. So we've kind of realized that there are these different ways of solving this problem. XAuth is sort of an experimental effort to see, well, what happens if we do go about creating this prototype that allows us to examine this opportunity as opposed to trying to upgrade every browser to support this use case first.
Yeah, I mean, that's ultimately, I think a smarter browser is essential. I mean, if you think about browsers as doing the common tasks across the web, obviously, I think it's not controversial at this point that social and personalized experiences are something that's not going to go away. It's not a fad, and so it would make sense that the browser could help you with that. The nice thing is the way we designed XAuth, it's actually using some of these HTML5 standards that are coming into fruition now, but that are actually supported by a large number of browsers already, such that, specifically for the geeks out there, window.postmessage and HTML5 local storage. And so there's actually no information stored on the xauth.org servers. It's in fact all down in your browser locally, and you're sort of sharing between web pages, but it's personalized to you. And so you could take that and build it into the browser, and basically nobody would notice the difference. So it's a neat example of how we can, rather than waiting for the next generation of all these browsers to actually have this baked in, we can ship it now, but with an architecture that actually is sort of forward-thinking in that way. And that's good for user privacy, obviously, too, because there's no big brother watching everywhere you go.
Well, and to that point, I think it's worth pointing out the status of the project. So this effort was, again, sort of spearheaded by Meebo. They invited a number of parties to join them, including Google and Microsoft, Yahoo, and
maybe there's a lot. Go check the blog post.
There was a bunch of people involved. But the point is that Meebo has gone and actually open sourced the code for XAuth. It's on GitHub under the XAuth account. They've done a good job of documenting how it actually works. And there's a lot of interest right now to your question about sort of, the big brother in the corner, kind of like, as you browse the web, to turn over the XAuth domain to a neutral party, whether that's, the Open Web Foundation or the OpenID Foundation. We're not quite sure where it will end up, but the hope is that it can go into a trusted third-party place that, is sort of in the business of figuring out internet identity.
And there are actually a number of precedents for this. In the SAML world, they have this notion of a third-party place to
And
look for
actually,
identity.
European education actually uses this. So in that case, you can imagine that there are hundreds of schools that all allow you to sign in with some academic account that you have at some website. So the way in which they figure out which accounts you actually have available to you is by using a central domain that knows about all the different account providers. So this isn't exactly a new thing.
Right. But it's kind
Wow.
of cool to see progress.
That was a deep dive on that topic.
Hopefully that
There's
answers
even
Mark's
more,
question.
There's more topics, and I don't think we'll even be able to get to them in the second show.
Well,
But maybe we should touch on a few things. I thought, because around this thing, when I was, I didn't actually make it to F8, but trying to absorb all the news out of there, it seemed to me that it was like almost a tectonic shift. There was big stuff happening, and one of them was a shift from Facebook Connect to OAuth. Which dramatically simplifies the integration between the sites of the web and Facebook. I think that might be worth talking about a little bit. The like stuff, there's Open Graph Protocol. I'd love to get into a little of that stuff just to give people some sense of what's going on.
So I think the thing that's really interesting in terms of the marketing speak around this idea is instant personalization. So the instant personalization feature that Facebook launched essentially works by whitelisting a few partners for whom I imagine they have some special contract with, that allows you to sign up to, let's say, bring your Facebook account to a Pandora.com or a Yelp.com and have a bunch of the information that you've said is okay to share with third parties instantly available to create a personalized experience on that remote website. So it is true that in the instant personalization case, some of your data, again, hopefully that you've decided to share with third parties, is being made available instantly. Now, from a user experience perspective, which is where I come from, I think this is actually a really interesting and incredible experience for people. There's no more passwords, they don't have to import their friends, all these things just kind of work.
I just see what music or restaurants my friends like, for example.
Yeah. The one challenge that I think instant personalization brings up immediately is that just because I'm signed into one of my profile providers in one browser tab, let's say I'm signed into Facebook in one tab, and I open up a new tab and I go to Yelp, doesn't necessarily mean that I want to actually correlate those profiles.
Right.
So the fact that I, as the user, am not necessarily involved in which profile I'm bringing to one site to another instantly means that there's an opportunity, I think, to improve that experience. So in general, I like the idea, I like the user experience, but I think there needs to be more choice in that situation. And so this is where, again, XAuth comes in. We kind of need the ability to do fast user switching for the web. So I can basically say in this tab I want to be this person, on this tab I want to be this one, so that me and my girlfriend can share the same computer and not have her Yelp friends be mashed up with my Facebook friends.
Which has happened in a few cases.
Right.
And I think, for viewers of this show to know, we always are a big fan of innovation and user choice, and you want a model where I might be using some small startup you haven't heard of, and I can still get on Yelp just as easily as Facebook or Twitter or someone else, because we know there's going to continue to be a bunch of new people trying to do new experiences and new technology in this space. And ultimately, if you're the Yelps of the world, you want to let your users show up with whatever service they use that has the data, as long as it's not a lot of work. And that's why these open standards are so critical to making you be able to have your cake and eat it too.
I think there's so much interesting stuff here around these announcements and the reactions in the marketplace, the privacy questions. But I really would like to have David here with us for that. So
Yeah,
if
for
we
sure.
can make that happen in the next episode,
Yeah, I agree.
The topic won't be going away.
Indeed.
So, our first doubleheader. All
Yeah.
right, guys.
Sweet.
First doubleheader, and we still didn't have enough time to talk about all the things that are going on. So
Clearly, we need to do this more frequently
That-
than every 3 months.
yes, that would suggest coming back and tuning in.
To another exciting episode of the Social Web TV.